Welcome to the Black Male Podcast. This is a space where we delve deep into the experiences, challenges, and triumphs of black men in today's society. I'm your host, Mike Sears, and each and every week we'll bring you some inspiring stories, insightful discussions, and actionable advice tailored specifically for black men looking to navigate and excel in all facets of life. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's episode of the Black Male Podcast. Today, we want to talk about mental health, and I want to kick off today's show by, again, delving into my book a little bit. I have a book, y'all. It's called Male Functioning. It's been out a little bit less than a year. Male Functioning. Get out of your own way and execute your dream life play. A lot of times we get in the way of our own success. And, I wrote this book to help men and anybody that's inspiring to develop, find your purpose, and understand your purpose. This book will help you get there. So again, we're talking about mental health today, and I wrote a chapter that's somewhat is focused just on that. It is called Inside the Helmet, chapter 4. So I'm just going to read a little bit about it. Of course, just go ahead and read. Your head is what leads your body, and it houses your central nervous system, your CNS. This system is composed of your brain and spinal cord. Your brain must be protected, and this is the preliminary function of your skull. When you play football, you require additional protection for your brain, and you wear a helmet with a face guard to do that. The helmet is worn on the head of football players, and it protects players by helping them prevent or reduce the chances of head injuries that may occur in practice and in games. Helmets also help protect your skull from fractures and your head from severe brain injuries. Along with protecting your physical brain, your mental health is just as important and should also be protected. There are more discussions happening about protecting mental health, and provisions are being made, but more still needs to be done. Your mental health should not be ignored. Be conscious that as your mental capacity and brain functions are housed underneath your helmet, and in the literal sense of metaphorically, it is important to care for both as much as you do your physical health. Again, just a small excerpt introducing that chapter about mental health. I use the book and I talk about real life situations, and I use the game of football to illustrate that. Obviously, in football, as I just discussed, football players wear a helmet. That helmet is what protects them for the things that they go through as they play the game of football. And I'm comparing that to in life. We have things that we go through in life, and we need to have guards. We need to have things that protect us mentally, keep us strong, and keep us healthy. So without any further ado, I want to actually get into who we have here with us today. We have some great guests that's going to give us some great insight, and they have some stories to tell and some things that they're working on. And so let's get into that. First up to the mic, we have this young man. His name, Kelvin Martin. If you haven't heard that name, listen for that name, because it's definitely one that you will hear. Dr. Martin is an educated playwright, filmmaker. He's an author, life coach, community mentor, resource provider, and an advocate for young people. Without any further ado, Dr. Martin.
Appreciate you, Mike. Appreciate you.
Welcome to the show, brother.
Man, you dug deep for that bio, didn't you? I appreciate it. I wasn't ready for that. I was like, who is that he talking about? It's me.
Yeah,
Appreciate you.
it's some things that I discovered that I didn't know about you. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's go as far back as when you were a kid. Now I named a few things that obviously you've had your hands in and things that you're doing now. But as a kid, did you see yourself doing what you actually are doing now and becoming who you became?
Well, I know this is your show, but I got to pause for a second just to say I'm proud of you and your journey and what you're doing, especially for the cause.
Yes, sir.
It takes a lot for men to talk and for a man to instigate the conversation. I appreciate you for just opening the door for men like myself, men of color, black men especially, that are taking the plunge to just have a real conversation with real men. So I appreciate you for doing that. So
Thank
just
you, sir.
much success to you, man. I
Yes,
appreciate
sir.
you.
Thank you so much.
Now, back to your question about my childhood, my nappy-headed childhood. Man, I just had this conversation the other day. I was talking to my mother, and I said, "Mom, what kind of kid was I?" And you know, Mama gonna give you that. You was a mess. I was like, what does that mean? I mean, everybody's a mess. What does that mean? And so
Right.
she was literally like, well, when I was young, well, even now, I can't just do one thing. I have to do a multitude of things. I can't study in silence. I can't read in silence. It has to be a noise going on or me making the noise. And so I remember younger, when I was real small, probably about 6 years old, my parents took me to the doctor and they said, this kid, something's different about him. We need to know what. And so they said, he does this. He doesn't read in silence, and he's always making extra noise. And what does that mean? And they took some tests, and they said, well, he's learning how to operate both sides of his brain.
Wow.
And so even now, I'll have a creative and an analytical thought going on at the same time. So when you go back, I go, wow, I guess I was there. So I'll play with a truck and then also try to figure out how to make the truck dance. So it because the wheels had to do some kind of turning.
Right.
So it was I don't know. It was just, but I would never have thought I would be here there.
Definitely.
And that's probably part of life. The journey has been interesting. I wouldn't trade any of it,
Right.
But I do know what I thought then, because I just want to be a actor
Really?
in Hollywood.
Okay. So that was
In
an
a-
aspiration early on.
Oh my God, yeah,
Okay.
that was a big house and all that other stuff, and it was so crazy because our aspiration was to be an actor, and we watching Good Times. I'm gonna be like JJ. JJ was Paul. So it was never about money for me.
Right.
It has never been. So it wasn't like I want to do this and buy my mom a big house because I thought whatever
Right.
she got, she earned it. But
Right.
but just looking back now, I was like, wow, did I have that dream then? And I don't think it was this. I think it morphed into this.
Right. And I asked that because I think it's important, no matter how young you are, if you're listening, or even if you're, more seasoned, more aged. I think sometimes we forget where we start.
Oh,
or where
absolutely.
we started, and how that played a part, though.
Yeah.
In who we become and how we kind of evolve. And it's just interesting to see so how even that changes. My youngest son is 9,
Yeah.
and he has a great imagination, and he says now what he wants to be. And I'm just interested in seeing, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, if that evolves or if he stays the course and actually becomes what he's saying. Yeah, this is what I want to be when I grow up.
What's good, you give him the freedom to choose and to explore.
Yeah.
So my brother and I are literally 11 years apart.
Wow.
And people ask me, y'all got the same mother and father? I was like, yeah, same household, but we were raised totally different.
Yeah.
And so my brother's way of thinking is totally unlike mine. And so I learned a lot from what not to do watching my brother do it.
Yeah.
And so my brother literally, and we have the physical Cain and Abel story because my brother finally told me, he said, I hated you as a kid.
Wow.
And I idolized him. I was like, just walk me to the store. Just roll the same truck with me. I mean, just do something with me. But he literally ignored me as I was a kid.
Wow.
So I became engrossed in my grandmother because my grandmother always had stories. So that was that creative part that wanted to hear the story stories. My dad was very hands-on. My dad was a bona fide hustler.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in the street. He was like, you get good grades, don't get in trouble, and stay out my business. and that was dad.
Yeah.
And so I saw mom all the time, but I didn't always see my dad. And so growing up, I always was like, okay, wow. So growing up, I had that maternal instinct that always surrounded me, but that masculine grip was absent for many years. Many years. I didn't get close to my dad till I went to college, and I was away from home.
Wow.
That's the only, so, but it when you have that opportunity just to explore, it opens a kid's mind, especially young boys. I would say explore. Let them. I mean, sky's the limit.
Yeah, I know. I had that freedom.
Yeah.
Having my father around when I was younger, I wanted to rap. And, you know, rap music. You know, you have a lot of adults, a lot of parents, you know, they're frowning on that. Even entertainment, period. That's not something that's not a real job, or that's not a real profession.
Right.
And the reality is, it is.
But Mike, you know, back then, I'm dating you right now, so you know, your rap back then was like clean, church going rap.
It was cleaner. We use words like fresh,
right?
but yet still, and he had a choice to shun me away from it or embrace it, and he embraced it.
Oh, good.
And because he embraced it and pushed me forth in it, it helped me continue to grow and evolve in that, and I didn't feel restricted or like I had to follow a specific path. Now, again, he had, you know, he was adamant about you gonna go to school, you're gonna learn, and education was important, but it wasn't like I had a path that was you know, you got to do this or you got to do that.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. That's good.
So you talked about you getting closer to your father in college. Let's talk about that. So I read that you went to college. You got your undergrad degree. You also got a master's degree and a PhD.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
I was the first person in my entire family to go to a 4-year university and graduate. My mom was the first to get an associate's degree. None of her siblings had actually finished school because of life.
Yeah.
And so I guess a couple of my aunts, they finally did go back and complete their degrees or their diplomas. But I had the educational component because I knew my dad, and this was the crazy part, my dad only had a 6th grade education.
Wow.
But he would tell me, education will take you further than what you can imagine. Yeah. He said, so nobody can ever take what you've learned away from you. Yeah. So I always held that true to form. The reason I went to Morehouse, I applied to 3 schools, Purdue, Harvard, and Morehouse. I got accepted to all 3.
Okay.
I went to White Parochial High School. They were like, oh, we know you're going to go to Harvard. Oh, we know you're going to go to Harvard. I had been fed up. I was probably at my limit with white folks.
Wow.
I'm just be honest. Yeah. Just because the competition was so thick. To be in the top 10%, you had to be the top 125% within your own race. Wow. And so you always were on. You never could have an off day. So the structure I learned in high school is undeniable. But when I got to college, I'm like, whew, I can breathe. Man, I stepped on campus. I was like, man, it was 2,600 other jokers looked like me that were smart, that were trying to escape too.
Shout out to black colleges, historically black colleges.
Yeah, but the thing I remember about my dad is, I'll never forget, they drove me to Atlanta. My mom was like, oh, my baby. My dad said, let's go. He did the typical black dad thing. He was like,
let him go.
Yeah, so he pulled me aside. He said, look, don't embarrass me, and you better get a good education. Yeah. Do what you got to do. None of that foolishness. You in this Atlanta. I don't know nothing about Atlanta. But if I have to drive down here because you in some mess, I'm going to know Atlanta before I know you. I was like, oh, wow. So, but the experience, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wouldn't trade it for the world. When I got to Morehouse, listening to my dad and what he expected of me, I knew I had to do it in 4 years. So I got 2 degrees in 4 years, which was the average student at Morehouse was doing the 6-year program. And I was like, my daddy said, I can't do 6 years. I got to do it in 4.
Wow.
And it was a hustle, but I learned a lot of discipline. That's how I got the experience of being on a different world.
Right. Talk about that.
I started doing fashion shows and the coronations, and one of the coronations I was head of, Yvette Lee Bowser, who was the producer from A Different World. She was one of the creators. She came to the show, and after the show, she said, "You want to meet? You want to come and learn the art of directing firsthand?" I was like, "Yeah." She was okay. I'm gonna fly you out and you can stay with me. I was like, "Okay." So I called my mom. I said, "Ma, I don't think this is a joke," but she told me, she's like, "Boy, you better go. You never know where that's gonna lead you." It was
when she said fly you out, where was she flying you to L.A.?
Flew me to L.A. Yeah,
from Atlanta.
From Atlanta.
Okay.
So went out there. Was out there for 2 weeks. Got to start on the show, but the highlight of it all was meeting Debbie Allen.
Okay.
And working under Debbie Allen as a director or learning her style.
Right.
That kind of changed my life in regards to looking at things from a different perspective, not just in theater or in film, but in life. You get to choose your own colors. I'll never forget when we did a read, and she looked at me. She said, "Baby, what do you see?" I said, "A chair, a wall." She says, "No, what colors do you see?" And she said, "You see the orange wall, but I see bright yellows and greens." And I was like, "Where the hell is that?" And so she says you have to use your inner eye to begin to see past your reality, and you can create any designs you want, and that eludes into the film or on screen. And I held true to that, but that was like the best 2 weeks of my life. I even to this day, I hold true to it. That's when Jada Pinkett wasn't even Jada Pinkett. That's when she first started on the show.
Wow.
I remember she actually took me to the airport. It's so funny. She had a little Pinto. And I had this big old suitcase hanging out the back of the Pinto going down to 101. It was hilarious, but yeah, I got there. But yeah, it was cool though. It was great. It was just a great experience. But graduating was probably the highlight because I made the family proud.
Yeah.
And then just went on from there. Started preaching, teaching, and all that great stuff. I went to grad school, got my master's degree in religion and education and Union Theological Seminary. And this, let me tell you real quick about God. So you can't out-slick God.
No.
And so I all my life, a lot of times, I try to slick God. I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to do this. I know you told me to do this, but I'm going to do this because if I do this, then I can have that done. And then God's like, okay, I'm going to let you get done talking, and I'm going to change you. So I literally went to Union in New York with the sole purpose of getting back into the arts, getting on TV. I got down there, every audition I went to, boom, door closed. He said, "I didn't send you for this. I sent you here for training." So I literally had to embrace that from a different perspective and just hone in on the degree.
Right.
But I was able to bring the theater and that whole experience into my degree, which elevated my whole, that Debbie Allen colorized it. So, yeah. And then a few years after that, got my doctorate in business administration and marketing management. And I'm an educational buff, and so I just recently got my board certification as a master mental health coach, and I've been working in the mental health field. So, yeah, that's me.
So
I'm tired talking.
That's interesting. I appreciate you sharing all this because, again, when I met you, I knew you obviously in the arts world, theater, and great director, excellent director,
Thank you, Mike.
excellent,
Thank you, Mike.
Excellent coach, one of the best. So that's how I met you. But then again, diving deeper into your story, again, you're educated. The experience on A Different World had to be, again, as you described it, phenomenal, life changing, and those are things that are key to our evolution.
Yeah.
And so you do that. You get a couple degrees in 4 years. You go study theology seminary, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Then you also get a doctorate degree. Now you cool. Like you dress cool, you act cool. I didn't know you was a doctor. You like the coolest doctor probably that I've come across.
I will never lead with that card.
Yeah, and you don't.
And I get that from my grandmother. My grandmother died at the age of 97. She said, "You never lead with your best card." She said, "You lead with your." She said, "You lead with your real card." She said, "Because you meet a bum on the street or you meet the president of the United States, they don't need to address you by your title. They just need to know your name."
That's good.
And so I always just tell my name. And so all the other stuff that happens, it happens, but that doesn't make me me.
Definitely. I think that's good character. That's a good character. That's good advice.
Yeah.
That's spades talk for some of y'all that didn't catch that. You don't lead with your best card. You kind of hold that and you just wait. It's timing. It's about timing, but it's also about character and being humble. And it's not a put on.
It's not.
Like again,
it's not, you probably what you get. Yeah.
If I wouldn't have brought it up, you probably wouldn't. We probably wouldn't even be talking about it.
I wouldn't even brought it up. I wouldn't even said anything.
But I appreciate that because I like highlighting, black men, because of what we constantly see.
Yeah.
That's put in the forefront, and I'm not running from who we are because we're all of it. But that's not all. The stuff that's being projected is not all of who we are.
Right.
Like we are educated.
Yeah.
We can't go to school. We can't make choices that are different than other choices. So I always want people to know that you have a choice.
You do have a choice.
You never have
good.
to be
That's
stuck in your environment or who you were raised by or where you were raised. If you just see past that,
right?
Because there's colors,
right? There's colors, yeah.
Past that,
yeah.
And if you just, if you just look that way, so
can I just say one thing?
Absolutely.
When you look at that, especially when talking about young men, young boys, young gentlemen, as I call them, they're so quick to grab a label that it discolors who their existence is.
Yeah.
And so you hear a young man who has a record or who has kids that he's not taking care of or hasn't seen his dad or whatever his circumstance becomes his title. And then he's got to now learn how to color that in a different phase where his character speaks louder than his situation.
Right.
So I applaud you for that, because I'm always on guys like, I don't want to know what you did. I don't want to know how you got here.
Right.
Tell me who you are.
Yeah. And a lot of times people can't separate the two.
I can't. It's a hard fact. It's hard. You get yeah.
And it's necessary though.
Yeah.
Because we, especially as black men, we are up against a lot of odds and we have to overcome a lot of obstacles to become
absolutely
whoever and whatever it is. Even within the best situations, there's still this air of overcoming, and that's for anybody. It has nothing to do with color, but just that element of overcoming. And it's not an easy thing, but it's a necessary thing. Any level of success requires you to get past, go past, and overcome.
Absolutely.
So wow. So preacher, playwright. So, we didn't talk about that much, but I know you got into writing plays. You also recently did a film and you wrote a book.
Right.
You got a book, y'all. It's called Mind Your Business.
Yes.
Talk about that.
I've been, how you say, okay, I'm gonna write a book, and it's stuff in your head. And recently I probably about a year ago, a good friend of mine who's a publisher, she said, it's time. And I said, well, I don't know where to start. Literally, I have so much I want to say. And she says, just write some things down. I said, about what? And then, so prayed about a lot of stuff. And then I kept getting hit from this mental avenue. And you saw Listen to the Silence,
right.
And how they went from stage to film and beyond.
Right.
And I just could not leave the field. I literally tried to run from it, and it waked me up at night. I'm like, wow. So had that conversation. I said, well, I guess this is the area. And then she said, just start writing. I literally wrote a manuscript that was probably about 500 pages.
Wow.
And so I said, I've been writing, and she says, that's a lot. And I was like, I got a lot to say.
Yeah.
Prayed about it, and God did a Gideon. He was like, too much. And it became this size because he said, if people are dealing with mental distress or challenge in their minds, who got time to read all that stuff?
Wow. Yeah.
If somebody needs a quick answer or a quick word, who's going to sit through all of that just to navigate to the end?
Wow.
That is not guaranteed to give you some steps.
Right.
And so it just kind of landed on the 6 steps to unzip your mind. And it was a process, and I had to learn it firsthand, unpacking some things in my own personal life that haunted me, daunted me, and experienced that allowed me just to land there. And I wanted to do it from a spiritual standpoint, but also a practical standpoint. So if a person on the street who doesn't know God, they're not thrown off by scripture. They're not overtaken by, this a church book. It's not a church book. It's a tool, and we use scriptures to back it up because I believe you can't be healed mentally without being connected to God.
Absolutely. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a good place to pause. And again, we're pausing. We're going to push play in a few more moments. I just need to take a few minutes just to acknowledge today's sponsors. So today's show is brought to you by Com2 Cree, spelled COM, the number 2, CRE. Planning an event? With Com2 Cree, your event is safe with me. From intimate gatherings to grand celebrations, we bring your vision to life with perfection. Contact us at com2creeevents, the number 1, at gmail.com, or call 313-334-8431. Com2 Cree, where your events become unforgettable. Also, Casara's Cakes and Treats. Indulge in sweetness at Casara's Cakes and Treats, where every bite is a masterpiece. From custom cakes to delicious treats, we make your celebrations unforgettable. Visit us on Facebook at Casara Cakes and Treats, or call 313-286-4130 and ask for Sharice. Your taste buds will thank you. For real deals, transform your car buying experience with For Real Deal, changing the narrative in automotive sales. Become an informed buyer with expert guidance from Mr. For Real himself, Lindsberg Petway. Visit us at www.realbrand.com or call 313-995-2025 for more information, and drive away confident. I'd like to thank all the sponsors that are helping us bring this show to you today. Their information will be available. I'll be posting some things, and their information, again, it'll be available on my social media platforms. And once the website is finished, you'll also be able to find their information there. And if I mention a sponsor that you're interested in, whether it's event planning or customized treats, or if you're in the car buying market, inbox me and I'll make sure you get their information. Thank you again to all of our sponsors. All right, now let's get back to this interview. Right before we went on break, we were talking about your book, Mind Your Business, 6 Steps to Unzipping Your Mind. You wrote mental health you wrote about mental health. You had a lot to say. God led you in this direction. He landed you there. I want to talk about that further, but I want to, add somebody to the conversation.
Okay, let's do that.
We have another guest here. His name is Robert Compton. He is a mental health professional. He is a limited licensed psychologist, a certified professional coach. Robert is also a private clinician and behavior health consultant with over 30 years of experience in various areas of the field. Let's welcome Mr. Robert Compton.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks
thank
for
you.
being on the show.
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate the opportunity and the invitation.
Yes, sir.
And again, I'd like to echo the thanks and also the congratulations on having such a platform. For Black men specifically, I know there has to be a concentrated and a deliberate effort for us to have a safe platform where we can talk about our issues and create a community that will allow us to heal within ourselves. So
Yes, sir.
appreciate what you're doing, and
Thank
much
you.
success to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And it's important. I think one of the key things that you said was safe. One of the reasons why I believe men don't talk a lot is because they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe with the information that they need to share, that they kind of just hold tight to the chest. And they don't feel like if I say what's on my mind, I'm going to actually get the help I need without being judged and or criticized or understood. A lot of men are just misunderstood. It's like no matter what I say or how I say it, you don't really hear my heart. And so again, this platform is for that. So as we continue to dive into this conversation about mental health, just talk to us a little bit more about what you actually do in your profession of over 30 years.
Well, kind of started my interest, of course. A lot of people start things with an interest in themselves. So started this journey about mental health, was trying to figure out why I did what I did and why things seemed to be locked in. Very early age, started to do that. Just started thinking and doing and studying and being a part of different things, which led a natural journey to looking at Black men and our struggle. Start dealing with Black boys at training school, those who've been incarcerated, and that kind of led me to a point where I looked at the families, dealt a lot with people who were getting out of the training schools at that time, and trying to incorporate them back into the society. But part of that was family reunification. So when I started going into these homes and dealing with these families, seeing that we had what was called, what I call co-occurring families. So a lot of times there was a identification of somebody who might have been in trouble with the law, might have even been incarcerated, and get them back into the society. But when they went home, a lot of the things that was happening in the home were, they were basically products of what was going on in the home. So a lot of substance abuse, a lot of trauma, a lot of violence, a lot of, criminality. And as we were putting these kids back in the home, their families would force them back into the old behavior that they kind of were displaying and got in trouble for.
Wow.
So that for me told me that I didn't know enough to help my community.
Wow.
So went on and continued to study and get a master's. Had a couple of mentors that were really Afrocentric. The late Byron Ramsey, and then Dr. Byron Douglas, kind of helped me shape my thought. And also thinking about the things that Bobby Wright did in Chicago, which was who was a big influence in mental health in Chicago.
Okay.
Because at that time we kind of thought that the people who were in mental health were going to be kind of the sages for the community to help to heal the hurt and things going on. So it was kind of a calling and a mission at that time.
Wow.
So kept going and ended up going to. Well, I had actually a thought of being able to start my own agency. So I went to, in this area, which was the overarching fiduciary for community mental health in Wayne County.
Okay.
Spent about 22 years in the clinical department there. And that's when a lot of my eyes started to open in terms of what was really happening, what's going on, and what was actually working. But as I continued to follow this natural transition of this journey, it sort of landed on trauma as being the genesis of a lot of things.
Wow.
And trauma can be kind of classified as having a fear, a reaction at a different time, at the wrong times, but and that can be, avoidance, it can be anxiety, it can be reactions, but the nervous system is always on and always scanning for danger. And so it's always doing things and reacting wrong, so to speak.
So now that you brought up something that's important, you mentioned a word that I think people throw around kind of loosely, but it's a word that probably maybe 10, 15 years ago wasn't used at all, and that's that word trauma.
Right.
Talking about trauma, can you explain a little bit of the differences or the difference between mental health, which is kind of what we're talking about today, versus mental illness? Because I think a lot of times when you say mental health, people identify mental health as mental illness.
Right. Well, I have a little different spin on it. I'm a little eclectic,
Okay.
and a little Eastern in my thinking and thought, because I know in terms of our society, we're more Greek in the way we think, in our philosophies, and of course we're Roman in how we govern things.
Sure.
So the Greeks sort of break things apart. So there's always, breaking things down and these opposites of either bad or good, light, darkness, mental health, physical health. We're actually talking about health.
Okay.
Because if you get into trauma and chronic stress, you'll find out that a lot of what's going on in terms of health issues, they're really coming out with some information now that, some studies say 1%, some say 10%, but typically only 1 to 10% of all diseases is connected to a genetic source. You're talking about 90% or 99% of physical illness either connected to some kind of mental trauma or lifestyle.
Wow.
So when you're talking about the genesis of disease and illness and physical health, you're talking about mental health, if you want to classify that, but it's actually a mental seed, a genesis dealing with somebody, their concepts and feelings and how they deal with stress.
Wow. So in essence, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not enough just to talk about what's happening in my head without connecting it to my entire body.
Absolutely.
And what's happening in my head, whether it's trauma, whether it's good health, and would you classify trauma as bad health or not, or illness, or how would you classify trauma? Is trauma considered healthy or good?
Well, I think trauma is basically the response a person has dealing with an outside event. Because trauma is different for different people, simply because somebody can go through the same event. Two different people can go through the same event. One will have a traumatic response to that, and somebody else will not.
Okay.
So it deals with the person's agency. It deals with their ability to deal with things. It deals with a thing called epigenetics, which is basically the traumatic experiences in a person's lineage. Some things can be passed down through the lineage. That's a new budgeting kind of understanding in science. They're saying that we as human beings now are comprised of 7 to 14 generations, including our own. So we're talking about having up to 255 life influences on us and how we react to things.
Wow.
And that's part of our makeup. So the brain is kind of, when even going in a traumatic state, the brain is kind of reacting normally to an abnormal experience. So the brain is acting the way it's designed to act under abnormal experiences.
Okay.
So it's a natural offshoot. So to say it's mental illness, it's actually responding the way it has been influenced to respond. The thing about it when it comes to trauma, usually the event isn't processed. So there's a memory, there's a very intense emotion attached to that memory, and that thing isn't processed. So it stays in the living cycle in the tissues of the body. Of course, the nervous system being primary, but also in other parts of the body. So you can think of trauma or traumatic experiences as something happening in the past, always coming and invading the present. And it can invade it through triggers, it can invade it through flashbacks. It can invade it through nightmares. It's always something in the past invading the present.
And what makes it traumatic is the response to that.
Absolutely.
Because, as you said, someone could have a similar experience, but their response is different.
Very different.
And their response may not be traumatic, or it could be.
Exactly. Now, of course, there are certain things that are typically more traumatic as far as them occurring. You know, like sexual assault is very traumatic. And typically people who go through that experience come out on the other end with somatic traumatic response. But then you have to kind of differentiate between what's a traumatic response, what can develop into post-traumatic stress syndrome, and then also you talk about chronic traumatic stress syndrome, which is something even more deeper and more layered.
Can you, within your experience, would you say for the black community or even for black males, is it a higher rate, or what's the comparison? Would you say?
Okay, so yeah, there's always a higher rate, and there's a reason for that. So if we look at something that's recently come to kind of surface in the 1980s, which is called the adverse childhood experiences. So there was an experiment happening in California by Kaiser Permanente, which was an insurance company and a healthcare system, and they were kind of looking at obesity, and they were addressing obesity, and they were keeping people who were very obese, and it was helping them lose weight. Well, they were noticing that at certain points for a lot of the people that was in this program, either they would stop losing weight, either they would lose all the weight and gain all the weight back. Some people were being put into psychiatric institutions because they was having some mental distress. And so they started investigating it, and they finding that a lot of people had various things happen to them before the age of 18. So they kind of gathered all of the most common things, and they put them in a what they call the traumatic express, which is ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences exam, and there was 10 things that kind of bubbled up to the surface. And so there was a correlation with how many times people might have these specific things happen, and there was a direct correlation to all these negative outcomes, whether it be promiscuity, depression, anxiety, incarceration, health conditions, substance use. All of these things were kind of bubbling up. So the more ACEs that a person has, the more likely they will have all of these things happen.
Okay.
Incarceration, all of these things were happening. In recent years, they've kind of expanded the ACEs a little bit more past the 10 to deal with community environments too, like bullying, being in, what you call dangerous community situations where you might feel danger of going out into community or seeing violence happening in the community.
Right.
So that has increased as well. So, of course, with disparity, with poverty, with homelessness, all those are now considered ACEs. And, of course, those who are economically challenged go into more of those situations. So that is the African-American community.
Wow. You said a lot.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. And it's important. A lot to digest, a lot to unpack. Is it... I want to transition our thought in what we're talking about in a moment, but I want you to answer this question for me first. In terms of treatment, in terms of helping to support black men, our community get to a greater level of mental health, is it something that we can do on our own without the proper support or without professional support? Or do we need something else? Because I would venture to say that for the most part, we just go alone and get along. We don't go to see a doctor, or we don't seek help outside of coping. How do you view that, or what would you suggest?
Well, you need all of the above. You need layers. Yeah, there's some things a person can do immediately, to have these tools to help them to change how they feel. And there's a lot of things you can do to help with that. But for some things, you'll need some community support. You have to be plugged into a community. Where, again, there's safety, there's ability to get affirmed, there's ability to get, listened to, share stories, understand those things, and then you need professional interventions that people can help with other tools to really deep dive in the different situations and help people to process and get those traumatic, very intense feelings and emotions out in a way that won't be detrimental to the person.
Ultimately, there's help.
Ultimately.
So nobody has to suffer in silence.
Yeah.
And or suffer alone, which for men, again, communities, period.
Right.
Again, this is the Black Male Podcast, so we're going to lean heavily into black men and our issues and our survival.
Absolutely.
But we suffer in silence a lot, and it causes us to die early deaths. It causes us to live stressful lives and lifestyles.
Right.
Yeah.
And as Brother Compton mentioned, mental health is not just about what's in your mind. It's your whole body that needs to be healthy.
Yeah.
With us saying that, I wanna shift gears slightly. Bring you back into the conversation, Doctor. To talk about.
Come back on in, Doctor.
You before the break, we were talking about your book, which is another reason why we're here. We're talking about mental health. We realize now mental health is more about just more than just what happens in your head. But you wrote this book, and you were talking about what led you to writing the book. Can you talk a little bit more about the book and what's in it and what people can expect if they pick it up?
Yeah, there's a lot of nuggets in the book. There's a personal assessment that I advise people to take to let you know if you just need, like Brother Compton said, if there are steps you need to take, if you need to have a conversation not only with yourself but a counselor. One of the stigmas that is out there, especially in our community, is that we don't need to seek help. That we don't need a therapist. It's taboo. We don't even talk about it enough in the church. I mean, we go to the church, hey, you come on up here to pray and get hands laid on you, and you go back. And it hasn't changed.
Right.
So prayer doesn't change your mind. Actions change your steps.
Yeah.
And so we've got to be mindful that when we put the faith into work and we put it into action, then things begin to happen.
Definitely.
So the steps are just designed to open the door for you to do some self-assessment and to seek the help that you need on your level.
Yeah, that's important too, because we're not on the same level.
Not on the same level.
It's important for a person not to feel like because I'm not like you, or I didn't respond the way that you did, then that makes me lesser or you greater. Yeah, we're all on different levels.
Yeah,
we're not the same.
Yeah, right. and Robert said something earlier that in regards to traumas before you get to the age of 18.
Yeah.
Most black men have experienced at least 3 traumas by the time they turn 18.
Wow.
And that affects them. And like you said, it stunts their growth. I mean, they can't even have good relationships because they've been traumatized and it hasn't been dealt with.
Right. And it's hard to deal with something when you don't even know that it's something you need to deal with.
Right. Exactly. Well, the thing about it too is that the statistics telling us that for those who are going through that kind of thing, that people are coming out of childhood with post-traumatic stress and don't know it. So you have post-traumatic stress coming out of childhood, and then your feelings and the things you are dealing with, you just think it's just me.
Yeah.
Or you're being told that it's just the way you are. Why are you doing this kind of stuff? So you have post-traumatic stress, and you're coming out of childhood with this thing. And then what that does is it sets people up for more trauma in the future. Yeah. So people who are traumatized are more likely to be re-traumatized over and over again.
And we didn't hear about post-traumatic stress only about war, or people that were in the services.
Yes.
Right.
But people have been warring in their minds, and they come out with PTSD. And you're 9.
Yeah. Wow.
They're worn in their family systems.
Family systems.
Yeah.
Especially, I ran into a young man. He was, by the time he turned age 13, he had been in 9 foster homes. Mm-hmm. Half of those he was sexually molested, starved on some of them. That was his. And I just, it reminded me of the interview that what's his name, Christian Keys just did the other night, about what he had experienced as a young man growing up, and just the horrific things that we go through and don't talk about it because you don't want to be less than a man. Even growing up, shut up. Don't cry.
Not only not talking about it, you don't even, because you don't talk about it and everything else you don't do, you don't heal.
You don't heal.
You don't heal.
No, not at all. And the thing about it now, we understand anybody past the age of 20, 25, they're responsible for their own healing. You know, they have to be conscious and they have to be deliberate in trying to get these things healed because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So for anybody that's listening, whether it's you or whether it's somebody you know, instead of criticizing the individual for the things that you see them acting out, you know, aside from just praying for them, you know, consider that they might need help. If it's you, don't be void of saying, hey, let me just talk to somebody about what it is that I'm dealing with and what it is that I'm going through. So maybe there is a level of healing that I haven't even realized I needed. Right. Maybe there's a pattern in your life that you continue to keep doing certain things, or people keep saying the same thing about you as you're entering in these relationships, and in your mind it's not me, or it's them.
Yeah.
Take the time. It's okay. It doesn't matter how young you may be, as it's been discussed. You can be as young as 9 or even younger than that. It's unfortunate, but there's a lot of warring in our minds. There's a lot of warring in our households and our families, and we come out swinging, and we've survived physically.
Yeah.
However, we end up still at a loss, internally and mentally, and it affects our whole body.
Yeah.
Before we go, you also have a program. An event that's coming up. Talk about that a little bit.
Program coming up. This actually, it's a workshop called Master Your Mental. It's a workshop dealing with grief, loss, trauma, all kind of instances that people deal with mentally. It's for all ages. It's going to be in Pontiac at the Silver Lake Church of the Nazarene, 520 West Walton Boulevard. Information's on Facebook. You can call me. My number is 248-686-4338. I'll give you more information. But yeah, just want to get the word out. Just helping people heal, families heal. I've learned working with people, and Robert probably can attest to this. It's hard to help mama heal, and you got kids that are broken. Absolutely. It's hard to help a husband heal, and he's not communicating with his wife. So it's putting the unit together and making sure that they can heal together. You all made mention of something earlier, and I just want to say this, is creating these safe spaces. And I always tell women, they'll tell me, this boy's just bad. Well, create a safe space for him to communicate why he's bad. Or what he's acting out of, or what's in his mind. My mom used to sit down and say, how was your day? No, don't tell me what you did. How was your day? How did you funnel through it? Yeah. And so it allowed me opportunities just to vocalize my emotions.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Wow. Tell us also where people can get your book and keep in contact with you.
Get my book, Amazon.com. It's on there. Just mind your business, Amazon.com. I'm on all social media platforms, Calvin Ray. You will find me. I am the Calvin Ray on Instagram, Calvin Ray on Facebook, Twitter. You can find me out there. I am there. And 248-686-4338 is my number.
I'll also post information about the book as well as
thank you, Mike,
as well as the event that's coming up.
I'm looking you up right now. I'm connected to you right now.
All right.
If there's anybody out, can people contact you if they have questions, and or are you available professionally, or not so much?
Well, I'm out there as a private practice clinician, working through Solace and Associates.
Okay.
People can come and ask for me specifically.
Okay.
I'm kind of a neophyte when it comes to social media.
Sure.
But I got a Facebook page and an Instagram. So if somebody want to DM me, That's cool too.
You got to respond to Robert.
I gotta respond. I look at it every like every 3 weeks, but that's okay.
If you in crisis, don't send them a message on Instagram.
Real quick, we're running out of time,
Okay.
but I like to do something at the end of the show called Fun Facts.
Okay.
Off the dome.
Okay.
For those that don't know what off the dome means, it's just off the top of my head. Just
take the head off.
Quick. So sometimes I tell my age. I try not to, but I know some kid out there like off the what?
What?
So just one question for both of you to answer real
Okay.
quick. Let me pick one. If you had a time machine, but could only take one trip, where and when would you go? Time machine.
I will go back to South Africa. That's the most exhilarating trip I've ever had, to be around what I call our people, genuine people. You have a new appreciation for life. I would go back again. I'd take my mama, though, this time because she wanted to go. I'd go back to South Africa.
Nice.
That's a hard question because that I resonate with that. But I think I'll go back to the time where I can sit and listen to the Sermon on the Mount. Be in that atmosphere and space where things just change and the whole new way of dealing with not only ourselves but each other was laid flat for us.
Wow.
That's what's up.
Listen, I wish we could have more time just to delve in and talk. I definitely would love to have you guys back just to talk more about whatever you have going on at the time. But
absolutely.
Again, these conversations are important. You're educated as well as you're practical, and I think we all need that. That's where growth comes from. So.
And we black and we proud.
Absolutely. Black every day, all day. Twice on Sunday.
Yeah.
Listen, I just want to encourage everybody that in the midst of all that we deal with and all that we go through, don't forget to rest.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We spend so much time working and grinding and trying to get the bag. Take some time to rest.
Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Black Male Podcast. We hope that today's stories and discussions have inspired you. Remember, our journey together doesn't end here. Stay connected, keep the conversations going, and let's continue to uplift each other. Thanks for tuning in to the Black Male Podcast. See you on the next episode.